Hello and welcome to episode 99 of Fergo and the Freak. I'm that bloke from Rugby League Project, Andrew Ferguson. You can find me on Twitter at AndrewRLP. And joining me as always is the glorious League Freak. You can find on Twitter at League Freak. How you going there?
I'm going really well. It's interesting that we're at 99 when we said we would stop when we got to 100, hey?
Yeah, we've got too much content to stop now, so we might have to go to... Should we go to 1,000?
Yeah, let's do 1,000 of them.
All right, we'll put 1,000 as the next marker. That should keep us busy for at least another 12 months or so, I guess.
I reckon at this rate.
We're firing through them pretty well.
Yeah.
Today we're going to look at what was a bumper weekend of international footy. And you actually went down and watched some of the games on Friday at Wynn Stadium. They had a triple header down there.
Yeah, it was interesting. I didn't see the first game between Australia and France, but I did see part of the second half of the Jillaroos versus the Kiwi Ferns, I believe they're called.
That's correct.
And yeah, that was it was cool to see most of the second half of that, and then was there for obviously Australia versus New Zealand in the men's. And my seats were in the concourse area. I'd never been to Wynn Stadium before, so I didn't get that high up overall view that I kind of like to have with the test matches to get a bit of a better feel for the overall contest and how it's going. But yeah, it was a fantastic game. I enjoyed it. The problem was the second half the Kiwis didn't turn up, which is a problem they've had for a long time.
Well, so we'll start from the beginning. Even though you didn't see it, the Australian Jillaroos, the women's team, beat the Kiwi Ferns 28-8. Now, the Kiwi Ferns dominated field position and possession for pretty much all of the opening 20 minutes. And when I say almost, I mean I think Australia had the ball for two sets in those opening 20 minutes. They were just defending the whole line that whole time, and New Zealand did not get across the stripe and score a single point. And it took Australia a little time to get on the board. They ran away with the game in the second half. As you're saying, Ali Brigginshaw was very, very good again. I was pretty impressed by Jess Surgis. She made a ton of meters and was constantly a threat. Millie Boyle, she just runs through things.
Yeah.
She got that massive leg drive and just runs through things. She doesn't look like she's all that big, but she's just strong and just hard to stop when she gets a bit of momentum going. And Hannah Southwell, who I think she's the lock, immense defender. Pretty much every tackle, she's pushing the opposition back. Had a good try-saving tackle as well in the first half. Another brilliant game from her. So yeah, it's the Australian team were, I'd say, dominant.
Yeah, and it was interesting they ran away from it. I can tell you, being at the ground and being closer to the sideline, some of the hits they were putting on were pretty good. Like, it's something about the women's game you don't really think about too much, but in these test matches, like, they were putting it on one another. And when we talk to a women's player, I really want to ask them about the recovery from those hits, because it's obviously different from the men. And yeah, like, they must be sore for quite a while after these games.
I'd imagine so, especially the forwards, because the forwards are all very strong and yeah, they don't hold back when they hit one another.
Yeah, and I think it was something we talked about in the World Nines review, that New Zealand really set the standard for quite a while with the physicality and the athleticism of the women's game. And Australia has really gone up to meet them, and I think they've gone ahead on both, areas of the game at the moment. And New Zealand will come back. There's no doubt about that. They've got so much talent. But I think Australia and New Zealand they're just miles ahead of everyone else in the women's game at the moment.
Yeah, they are.
And I think that we kind of saw that a little bit in the World Nines with the women, with the English team coming out. And they were pretty confident, and they were really shown to be at a different level. And hopefully the English women, I mean, there was an article I saw earlier today where the female, I guess, Woman of Steel award winner, she said she'd love to come over and play in the NRLW. So it's going to be interesting to see how the women's game develops, and if the NRLW ends up being like the NRL, where it's just a one premier comp, or if it ends up where maybe there isn't just one main place. It's, New Zealand sets their own sort of thing up and England sets their own sort of thing up. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I know I mentioned before, I'd love to see a PNG team in the NRLW.
Yeah, and I think that, you just bring the team in. Yeah. I don't see any reason why not to. Obviously, costs are probably a big factor in terms of how much the women's game generates. But eventually that's going to come up to the right level, because the women's games are, they're getting good ratings. Like and when I say good ratings, it's not like, oh yeah, that's good. It's like they're properly good ratings. So eventually they're going to be able to show sponsors and TV, broadcasters and stuff that it's ready to invest in that level of the game, and they'll just be able to pay their own way, which is no doubt what they're looking for themselves, is just to be able to almost disconnect from the men's game and stand on their own 2 feet financially, because they'll be generating so much money. They won't need to rely on the men's game at all.
Which would be fantastic.
Yeah, would be great.
Moving on to the second game, it was the, we don't even know what their name was. The Australia A under-24s junior Kangaroos.
Yeah.
And they took on the French. It was like a combination France B team.
Yeah, and they were ran out as the French team.
They had a bit of drama actually during the week, where just before game, where Jason Battieri, the French captain, pulled out and says, I don't want to have anything to do with this team anymore. They're unprofessional, and had a bit of a swipe at the French Rugby League, and just went, wow, another International Rugby League body that players are unhappy with. And it made me realise that we need to start, these bodies need to start talking to the players and find out what they want, because you can't have this many disgruntled players across the international field. You've got France now, we had Tonga, obviously, we had Lebanon earlier. It's just, I don't know, the RLIF needs to probably get involved and say, there's a lot of unhappy players. What do we need to do to fix things? Because all these players are complaining about is how the game is run back home and that sort of thing. So they're actually not thinking about their own pockets, which is very unique as well.
Yeah, and it's something you don't see too often, really. And I think that because of what we're seeing in the international game with, excuse me, with so many, it's expanding quickly, and it's not so much that it's expanding, they're actually playing games against each other now. And there is money being generated, and I think the players are seeing that. And when they see that money not going to where they think it should be, keep in mind, these are rugby league professionals. They kind of have an idea where the money should be spent to a certain extent. Yeah. They blow up about it. And the good thing is that it's showing that these organisations, they are under scrutiny, and that hasn't been the case for a very long time. I wonder when it's going to happen with the New Zealand Rugby League, because they have been run so terribly for so long, and it's been that, the cracks have been papered over a little bit just by the raw talent that comes out of New Zealand. And I think the work that, and it's not just the NRL clubs that do it, but a lot of Australian-based NRL clubs have developed so many good junior players from New Zealand. And I think that that's covered over a lot of the poor performance by the NZRL. And I think eventually it's going to happen. And I wonder if it'll happen. With the current player base, or whether some of the current players will retire and then speak up about it. Because I think that a lot of the Kiwi players, they don't want to rock the boat because they know that it would be really bad for New Zealand Rugby League if they started speaking out now and caused turmoil for the game over there. And I think that they'll probably wait until they've retired, and then they will have something to say. That's just my feeling. And that's based on, that's just a hunch because they're all starting to do it.
I tend to think that is how to play out. I also think, too, that they won't take it to the media. They will just deal directly with the board and make sure that change happens that way. New Zealand's interesting, though, because they tend to be able to take pretty much any Pacific Islander player that they can. And that's something that needs to be addressed, just like Australia does.
Yeah.
That needs to be addressed because I'd like to see, given the size of the Pacific nations now and how well they're starting to perform, I'd like to see them have all of their eligible players playing for them instead of playing for New Zealand or Australia.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, the New Zealand Rugby League has sat on its hands for a long time. And they've talked about doing a lot of things and never made that first step. Like they've talked about having a Kiwi version of Origin and never once taken one single step towards having one.
How would that be? I mean, we're getting off topic here a little bit, but how would that even work? Like, the only way you can have a Kiwi Origin is going to be something like North Island v South Island, and that is going to be so lopsided. North Island is going to flog South Island every time. So then you've got to look at, well, maybe it can be Auckland versus someone, but then you still got the same problem. Pretty much.
And that's like city. That's almost like city versus country, where it's like, I know the country players get, you might get the rest of New Zealand being like, yeah, we want to flog Auckland, but what are the players in Auckland really playing for? It's not a big thing for them. I think that the best way to do it is, I don't know if you go like a combined Pacific Islands team versus New Zealand or a Polynesian versus Maori game, or you just play New Zealand versus Samoa or Tonga or whoever. I think that maybe that's the way that the game needs to head right now. But I do think they need that stepping stone between test level and club level. And they just simply need to, they're playing all right amount of games now. And look, they play against Australia so often. The problem with the New Zealand team, and we're already talking about the New Zealand game, but they can win a final against Australia on any given day. They can win a final without doubt. But 80% of the time they won't turn up, and that's a big problem for International Rugby League.
It is. Especially when it comes to Australia, because so many of the Kiwi players play alongside or opposite everyone who's in the Australian team on a week-to-week basis anyway. Mm-hmm. There's no excuse for them not to turn up and be, an equal with the Australian team more often than not. So for them to be struggling as they do is always a bit of a worry.
It really is.
So we'll go through the Junior Kangaroos game. The Junior Kangaroos won 62-4. Mm-hmm. They led 42-0 at half time, so they only put on 20 points to 4 in the second half. The only real big thing, this David Fifita copped a freakish eye injury when I think Paul Marcon was on the ground kicking to get up after he'd been tackled, and a stray boot went up and hit Fifita as he was getting off the ground and running back on side, and it caught Fifita in the eye.
Yeah, and it was, like sometimes you see that happen and they've just flicked the player with their boot. He properly got him about as good as you could get someone, and hopefully Fifita's okay. He's not. I think that he's been ruled out of playing for Australia for the rest of the season, and he's going to have plenty of time to heal for the NRL season. It was really unfortunate. We talked about this game before it happened, and we were saying, I can't remember if we recorded it on podcast or not, but. Yeah, probably not. I think we had a really, really good talk about it off the podcast. I think France, needs to do this. I think they need a reset in where they believe they are. I think they need to reach out. They need to stop just playing England and some of these European nations because they're above that. As a nation, a rugby league nation, they're above that. And I think they needed this readjustment to where they're at in the pecking order. So I think that as bad of a loss as this looks on paper, I think it'll, in the long term, be a good thing for French rugby league because they'll learn lessons from it.
Yeah, I'd like to see Australia, the full strength side, play against France on a more regular basis than they currently do. I mentioned it, I think, in a previous episode that Australia's only played France 4 times since the 1994 Kangaroo Tour, and that is disgraceful.
It really is.
I don't even care who's to blame for that. Just fix it. But that's all we've got to do there.
Yeah, and I don't know how, in terms of travel, I don't know what the flights are like from Australia to France, but I can't see why we can't kick off any tour of Europe or even England with starting in France with the test match. Not doing it at the end of the series. I think we should start the tours of Europe against France. They deserve it. I think they need to see the Australian Rugby League team in the strongholds where rugby league is strong in the south of France. And they just need more games, and they need more games against everyone. France needs to, and I don't know if the International Rugby League, if they can fund these games a little bit more, but I would like to see France come to the Southern Hemisphere as many times as possible to play the likes of Fiji and Papua New Guinea and Australia and everyone.
Yeah. It'd be good if France could have a tour where they come over here, and England should do it as well, and Ireland and Scotland and Wales, any country who wants to do it. They should come over and just go, right, instead of playing all these little regional areas of Australia, just come out here and play international matches. Yeah. It's just got to be one each time. Papua New Guinea, Cook Islands, Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, New Zealand, Australia, go back home.
Yeah, and I know that it went under the radar, this game. And look, I wouldn't even be upset if it was a French, because this was described as a kind of a French B team. Even if they're sending a B team out, build up that strength in numbers. Get those players so that they go home and they're like, okay, I know what David Fafita is doing in Australia. What if I train harder and get towards that level? And just lift the standards like that. I've always said when it comes to International Rugby League, forget about bringing these overseas players into a team and saying that they're giving experience to other players. The only experience you get is through experience. And that's what the French team got on the weekend. And they'll be better for it, as bad as that loss was.
I fully agree. The young Kangaroos, they did pretty well. Zach Lomax, Victor Radley, Pappenhausen, Campbell Graham, all scored, a few tries each. The Australian team were never under threat here. They just raced out to a big lead half time and then just cruised through the second half.
And we'll probably talk about it later on in the podcast with the Australian international setup. But I think that I get the feeling Australia is finally taking International Rugby League seriously, and I think we've set up some pathways now for young players, and it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out for the Australian Test team, because we could be coming towards an era for the Australian Rugby League at international level that's pretty dominant once again, I think.
Yeah, my only criticism is this should not be called Junior Kangaroos. I'd like Junior Kangaroos to be under 19s or under 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And they could just call this either the Prime Minister's 13, as I said before, or, Australia A. That would be fine by me.
I agree 100%. We should be having an under 20s World Cup every 4 years. And I've said that for a long time, and that's where the Junior Kangaroos should be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Last game on Friday was the test match between Australia and New Zealand. Australia won 26-4. They were never really threatened in this game. One thing that stood out for me was how average Sean Johnson played.
Yeah, he was non-existent in this game. I didn't have the greatest view. As I said, I was lower down in the concourse, so I didn't get the overall view of it. The first half to me seemed it seemed like a real old-fashioned test match. It was a bit grindy, which is what you get at test level, and waiting for the opposition to crack. Unfortunately, in the second half, New Zealand properly cracked, and I mean Australia turned it on. They're magnificent when they get into that sort of mood that they were in the second half. A couple of things that stood out for me: how big Latrell Mitchell is. Like, he's as tall as most forwards. Payne Haas is maybe the biggest footballer I've ever seen. He's incredible. Paul Vaughan is massive as well, but Haas was bigger than Paul Vaughan, which is kind of weird to see. Paul Vaughan's towering above everyone. Haas is bigger than him. They were fantastic. And it was just one of those games where Australia, it's almost like and I've said this about Australia for a long time, I've only ever seen Australia not turn up and be real business-like about a test match once. And that was that, I think it was maybe Three Nations final that they lost against New Zealand in 2005, I believe it was, where New Zealand just smashed them. Every other game, Australia turns up, and this was one of those games where it was like, man, you just get this out of Australia, where they turn up, they always play well, they really ask questions, and you've got to play your best game to beat them. And in that second half, New Zealand was pretty poor.
They were dire. They did not threaten Australia in any way, pretty much at all in that second half. It was hard to watch.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. I can say at the ground, the atmosphere was still very good. I've been told that the crowd wasn't as big as it was posted.
Well, the attendance was listed as 9,052.
Oh, see, when I was at the ground, it said the attendance was 18,000.
Oh, that is wrong.
Yeah, I've been told that it's probably closer to 14. But yeah, it was a good atmosphere. Everyone really enjoyed it. It was a good night. It was a really good night and a real good celebration of, Australian Rugby League, really. One of the funny things was, I don't know if I've told you about this, at about 20 minutes into the match, somebody come out with handfuls of New Zealand Rugby League flags and started giving them away because they couldn't sell them at all. So they were giving out like as many New Zealand flags as you wanted. It was funny.
Oh, wow. Now, Mel Meninga has decided that he wanted to bring up David Fifita into the test side for the next test match, which is this weekend or something like that.
Yep.
But Fifita's injury has meant he's had to look elsewhere, and he's called up two players to join to make up for the 20-man squad. One is Victor Radley.
Brilliant. Good move.
And the other is Clinton Gutherson.
Mel Meninga needs to be sacked.
Do you think that there's something in the air in the Gold Coast that rots the brain of rugby league people? And they start to see things that are not glistening and fantastic and assume that it is.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you know what? In the World Nines, it was really interesting watching Australia play in the World Nines. When Clint Gutherson got the ball, it was like, oh yeah, he's a level below this. And I don't know why they've called him up at all. There's no reason to. He's not at this level.
Gutherson is perfectly fine at NRL level.
Mm-hmm.
That's his maximum. He's like Mitchell Pearce.
Yeah.
That's.
I don't get it. I really don't get it.
That's like weird. I don't even know where's he going to be playing him? It's not like Tedesco's going to be injury prone or any of the halves. I don't get why you'd bring Gutherson into the side anyway, even if he was, a better player than he is. Where are you going to put him?
We'll put it this way. what does Gutherson bring to an Australian rugby league team that Ponga wouldn't? Like, they can both play fullback and 5'8" at a stretch, because, I mean, this is like 20th man, you know? This is an emergency pick.
I would argue that, and you're not going to like this, but I would argue that Gutherson is a better 5'8" than Ponga. And that's because Ponga at 5'8" has one thing. He drifts left, try and engage the defender, and either pass afterwards or take on the line. That's all he's got.
But what does Gutherson do?
He does other things, but he doesn't do them very well.
I was going to say, yeah, but does he do them well?
This is the thing. He's got variety, which is, but it tends to be easy to shut down.
Okay, how about this, right? Just say you're picking Gutherson for, it's got to be the 5'8" fullback.
That's the only place I put him. 5'8".
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I doubt it's for a wing role, although you could chuck him in if you really needed to. But if you were going for the fullback 5'8" role for someone, couldn't Whiten do that at a stretch?
Well, yeah, I think Whiten would be the first choice.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing. I don't get why you put a spine player on an extended bench when there's no injury concerns over your spine. To me, that just seems weird.
Yeah, I like having a utility, like not on the bench, but in the squad.
And that's what Radley is.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't.
You can put Radley on the bench and bring him on to play in the back row.
Oh,
but he can also cover the halves and hooker if need be, if there's injuries and stuff there. So he can still serve a decent purpose if he doesn't get to play his preferred position of hooker.
Yeah, look, I think a stretch Victor Radley could play every single position on the field. And I'm not saying he'd be a superstar at it, but I think that if you said, man, no one else can play fullback, Victor, can you do it? He'd do his best. He's a fantastic utility. I'm a big fan.
Braithen Astor did his best at fullback too.
Are you talking about the highest individual game point scorer in International Rugby League history, Braithen Astor?
That's the one. Right, so we move on to Saturday. There were 4 international matches on Saturday. And I don't know if many people know this, but the first one was actually played at Cabramatta. And it was Malta beating Turkey 28-12. The last 20 minutes of the game got a little heated. And it's something that happened also in the one of the other games there, which we'll mention later on, is we saw on Twitter a fair bit people talking about how great it is that, you know, the one referee system. And they've been blinded because of all of this talk in the media over here about how shit the 2 referee system is and how shit the referees all that crap. And these same people sit there, push the barrow to have one referee on the field. And what we saw on Saturday in 2 games in 2 different countries with 2 different referees is that one referee, when there's a bit of heated stuff going on and teams starting to get a bit niggly at one another, one referee loses control of the situation very quickly.
Yeah. And because everyone's fired up, they're trying to spot things, but they're trying to referee the game at the same time. This isn't a criticism of the ref. There's just too much to watch.
That's right. Especially when you're, when you don't have as many officials and eyes on the ball, eyes on the game, and you don't have video technology and bunkers and stuff to help you out with what you're doing, you're basically out there on your Pat Malone, and you got 2 sideline officials, and they may be doing this stuff part-time, so they're not as intensely trained and skilled at officiating as a lot of the officials in the NRL are. And again, not a criticism, it's because they just don't get as many opportunities to referee and officiate games. They might do 10 games a year, whereas the ones in Australia are doing 20 and 30, and they're doing the most elite games that are played on the calendar every year, and then they do internationals after that. So it's it's a problem there. So yeah, it got a bit far at the end of that match, but Malta they were clearly the better team there. It was a good performance. Jared Sammet again. He tried to score on about 3 different occasions in the final 15 minutes, and every time the Turkish defence just held him out, and he started getting a bit frustrated at the end.
Yeah.
Looked like he wanted to start a fight with someone for some reason.
That's weird because I have always said Maltese people are the nicest people I've ever met in my life. I've been lucky enough to know Maltese people my entire life, and different people at different stages of my life, and they've always been the nicest people. I can't imagine a Maltese person angry.
Well, he was born in Blacktown.
That makes sense. It's all so clear.
There we go.
Does he still dye his hair that blonde colour?
I think so, yeah.
Oh man, he's got to get rid of that. He looks like the dude from the band Everclear. He needs to get rid of that look.
Wow. That's a reference that I'd forgotten about a long time ago.
Yep, plenty have.
The next game saw the Tonga Invitational team beat Great Britain 14-6. And boy, there's a bit to unpack here. There's a bit to unpack here.
Yes.
I was going to start with, okay, one of the problems I find here with this Great Britain team is having a coach in Australia who doesn't have eyes on the English game, because there were players who have been picked in that Great Britain team who just shouldn't have been there. And I'll say it, okay, Jermaine McGilvery, Ryan Hall shouldn't have been anywhere near that side. I would have had Regan Grace on one of those wings as a bare minimum. The bloke's got speed, and I think that was something that Great Britain needed. They needed a go-to X factor somewhere on the field, and they just didn't have it.
Yeah, and I don't know if Wayne Bennett is looking at Hall and McGilvray for their size, but that's all it can be, because they're too slow. They're immobile. They don't play the wing position very well. Their positioning is terrible. Hall looks like he's done, and they do. They need someone dangerous on the wings, and these two just aren't dangerous.
No.
They basically, Tonga's forward pack blasted them for 80 minutes, and that the Great Britain just did not. They were unable to respond. Like, they tried hard for 80 minutes, but they just weren't good enough. And I think that what we saw was something that I know I've been saying for a number of years now. Tonga is better than England for sure. And Tonga didn't get much out of their halves, and England didn't get much out of theirs. Widdop did a couple of interesting things during the game, but he was hampered by the fact that his forward pack was not able to go forward. And Coote and Jackson Hastings, once again, they were shown to be good at club level, but not that next level sort of player. Coote got absolutely annihilated in a couple of big tackles, and Hastings just looked, and I don't like saying this because he's had to fight hard to get where he is, but he looked out of his depth at this level, unfortunately, for England.
I will say this, though, for Jackson Hastings. He is only young.
Yeah.
He's shown plenty of potential this year in his first season over there in England.
Yeah.
And I think I'd like to see England/Great Britain persevere with him, but he does need to have a lot more experience at these higher level games. I don't know how they get that, but he just looks like he needs a bit of extra polish, a bit more guidance, a bit more learn how to control a game a bit better. He just sort of looked to be playing a little bit off the cuff a bit to me sometimes, which was generally ineffective and useless and bad for the team.
And that was kind of the knock on him when he was trying to break into the NRL as well. And that he needs more competition at that level, but he just didn't offer a great deal. And British Rugby League now is in an interesting situation because, it looks like Sam Burgess might be retiring. James Graham's right near the end of his career, and I hope James Graham plays till he's 40. I love James Graham quietly.
He's brilliant.
He really is. He's just
I rate him as a much better prop than that Thompson one everyone was in England was talking up as the best prop in the world.
Well, he lasted 12 minutes.
Yeah, I would take James Graham in a heartbeat over that bloke.
100%.
Every day of the week.
I just worry that this is a sign of where British Rugby League actually is. They're not producing outside backs at all. Like their outside backs they're not even first grade players in my opinion. And it's been proven for the most part. This isn't even something that is theoretical. This is something that's been proven. They're not producing halves that are of any quality at all, and so they're having to go to Australia for it. And their best forwards on their way out, and the guys that are replacing them are okay, but just okay. And when you see them play against a team like Tonga, where their forwards are some of the best in the world, I mean, I would say that they're probably second behind Australia right now, their forward pack, and they're led by Jason Taumalolo, who is, I mean, you've got to rate him on an all-time scale. Yeah, I do. I really worry now. I think that there's been a treading of water in British Rugby League for a good 10 years where they've managed to keep going. They've had some wins over New Zealand teams that have not turned up, and it's looked good. But I think now it's all of those issues now can't be hidden. And look, they might win this series against New Zealand that's coming up because the Kiwis don't turn up sometimes. But yeah, I think Tonga really, if Tonga had have had a decent half, they would have won by about 40 points.
Would we? I've got a theory, okay, as to why the English and / Great Britain side is so poor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to sound a bit long-winded.
Mm-hmm.
I put it down to the farcical promotion and relegation system because what it breeds is short-term thinking. Yep. And what I mean by that is each team is trying to make sure that they either get promoted or don't get relegated. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you are at your best every year. And the best way to do that is to try and poach players from the best competition in the world every year. Mm-hmm. And so their focus is to spend all the money they have on getting players from Australia to come over and play in their team to bolster their ranks, or from New Zealand, instead of investing huge chunks of money in junior development.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many years, like we're talking since 1996 when the Super League was in, when they had the opportunity then to hit the reset button and change everything, and they just didn't. And I mean, this is just an ongoing issue that was starting to rear its head in the early 90s. And we're at a situation now where you can't go back and fix it. England's going to be in a situation where they're going to have such limited quality juniors coming through.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to start getting spanked by a lot of other teams. And when your national teams start getting spanked, it's hard to start to get kids interested in playing for them.
Yeah, and I think that also you've got an issue where the Rugby Football League is building up the championship, and they're doing a pretty nice job of that. Now, they also want Super League clubs to have reserve grade teams, and that's a must. That you just have to have that. But they haven't got the overall player pool and the player depth to do both. So, and one is going to suffer. And if it's the reserve grade competition, that's going to be just as bad for player development. And if it hurts the championship, that's going to just kill the championship. I mean, I can't imagine that these Super League clubs are going to get these reserve grade players from anywhere other than championship clubs. There's also a lot more money that needs to be outlaid to do this in the British game. So they're in it's like a catch-22 situation.
Yeah, they're kind of running the risk of creating a bigger gap between Super League and the next division down, because most of the championship players are probably going to end up being reserve grade, which means the majority of what's left over will be League One, which is third division.
Yeah, and how can those clubs survive in terms of the finance? I mean, if they're putting on games of football in the championship and people are basically watching amateur players run around, they're going to know it. You know, when these teams start getting decimated by Super League's reserve grade teams, they're going to know it, and it's going to hurt their bottom line. And we know how perilous the situation is financially for the vast majority of clubs in England. It's a real worry. The only thing that is going to get them out of it, I think, is if NRL clubs start scouting English Rugby League and keep developing players. But you know, that's not always going to be what's going to get them out of trouble. They're a whole nation. They're the first rugby league playing nation. And to see them lose to a small island nation like Tonga, and this isn't just England, this was Great Britain. It's a real worry.
It was more rest of the world than Great Britain. Let's be honest. I mean, they had 3 Australians in the team?
More Australian ball players than were from real Scotland, real Wales, and real Ireland combined.
Yeah, when you've got all of Wales, Ireland, England, and Scotland to choose from for your test squad, and you were unable to get enough to field a 17-man team that's competitive, so you have to draw on people who were born in Australia, that's a problem that needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
Especially when the players that they brought up from Australia to play for Great Britain weren't exactly... they weren't even state of origin quality players in Australia.
Well, it's not like it was... And look, Australia used to do it. We don't do it as much now, which is good. It's disgusting when we were doing it. But it's not like Great Britain called up Semi Radradra, you know? It's not like they were calling up Kiliuwate when he was at his try-scoring best.
Mm-hmm.
They're calling up, and they're calling up this level of players because they have to, because the players just aren't there. It's a real worry. And I
was going to say, with the club thing, would it work? I know English clubs that all have the shits over it. I mean, if they can't even handle changing their name to appeal to a bigger market, then this idea is never going to work.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of trying to have a reserve grade competition, just have every Super League club has to be affiliated with a championship side and a League One side, and have the same number of teams in each competition. So each Super League team has a championship team and a League One team. You can still have promotion relegation, because as soon as one team goes up or down, then the affiliations change.
I was arguing this point 15 years ago, and a lot of English fans hated it.
Yeah,
they see it as an attack on their clubs. Oh, what? So that's going to be a closed shop, and we'll never be able to get promoted. And what happens if we get promoted? They hate it. They're championship clubs, and their fans and their supporters. And as we saw with Swinton, they feel as though they're this special thing, and they'd rather die a tiny little club than look for something bigger. Yeah,
it's crazy small-mindedness. And this is the problem, okay? England fans surely can see that the game is not going forwards in leaps and bounds in England as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Which means you need to start looking at completely new ideas.
Yeah.
And if I'm completely honest, I'd say have 16 teams in Super League and completely abolish promotion relegation so that Super League clubs can stop panicking about whether they're going to die or not or get relegated, and they can stop poaching players, fringe first graders and old players from Australia. They can actually sit there and go, right, let's put this money into developing tons and tons of juniors, and we can bring them through League One. We can bring it through Championship. You've got the structure right there to bring these young players through and make sure that when they get to Super League, they've been hardened through the lower grades and they've played good football along the way, and they're ready to go as soon as they hit Super League. How is that a bad idea? Promotion relegation to me is it's absurd.
Oh, it's disastrous. It's a club killing system. And I mean, you look at if we had it now, we would have just relegated the Gold Coast Titans, right?
And
And
possibly
so,
the Dragons.
yeah, yeah. And who would we have brought up? We would have brought up the Burleigh Bears and the
Newtown.
Newtown Jets. It'd just be stupid. Um, I feel as though rugby league in Great Britain has, and this is incredible. I can't believe it. They haven't hit the crisis point yet. And I wonder what the crisis point has to be before somebody says, oh, yeah, we can't keep doing this. We need to make massive changes. It's going to upset people, but we're going to do this to survive. Because here's something that's really scary. Now, two Super League clubs are not in Britain. You've got a French team and you've got a Canadian team. It's just the beginning of that. At what point do these international clubs who they've got their eye on those British pounds and that Super League, money. At what point do you get enough of those sorts of clubs together that are being built? There's talk of a New York team, there's talk of an Ottawa team. Toulouse is ready to come in. At what point do you get enough of those sorts of clubs where they do this real scary thing, which is say, hey, we don't need these English clubs. And they can all walk away as a block together. And that's when, is that going to be enough? Is it going to be enough when the Rugby Football Union, taps Leeds, Wigan, St Helens and Hull FC on the shoulder and say, look, we're sick of this. We'll buy you for an immense amount of money and that will be it. I don't know what the crisis thing was supposed to be. I thought that a team like the Bradford Bulls dying would have been the crisis, but apparently it's not. It's not enough to make real proper changes.
When they went into administration the first time after getting relegated, that was when Bell should have been ringing. A team like Bradford should never be going to administration.
Never. They're a whole city. One club, one city. The one of the 4 teams that have won a Super League title. Now there's only 3 of them. What has it got to be 2? Has it got to be down to 1? I don't know what the crisis point is.
Which of the 3 remaining teams needs to get relegated for the league to stand up and go, shit, we've got to do something?
I don't know.
I'm thinking Wigan. Imagine if Wigan got relegated.
It would be terrible. It would be really terrible. It's terrible that London got relegated this year. Like, they had an all right season.
Imagine this, okay? In 10 years' time, you could be looking at a Super League that contains, if they stick with 12 teams, Toulouse, Catalan, Toronto, Ottawa, New York, London. That's half the competition is made up from teams that aren't from the north of England.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to have St Helens, Wigan, and Leeds there, which means you've got 3 other Northern English teams likely in the comp.
Yeah, and at some point that the money will decide it. And I tell you what, it's going to be way easier to sell an international club competition than it is to sell a competition where most of the teams are little towns in Northern England.
Oh boy, Great Britain needs to do something. They need to start it at the bottom. They need to start on creating talent and getting it through, because it's looking bad. And I know it's only one game, but this is the culmination of several years of this sort of stuff going on, and nothing being done about it.
Yeah, and you've seen it coming. And the crazy thing is, Tonga's only going to get stronger. Fiji is only going to get stronger. I think Samoa beats this Great Britain team pretty handily. Their halves are way better than Tonga's halves, and their forwards are damn good as well. I think they would smack Great Britain. Where is Great Britain going to be in 10 years' time? Because it started out, well, Australia's beaten us, but we're still second. And then it was New Zealand started beating them pretty regularly. Now it's Tonga. Who's next? Do they have to? Would you put $1,000 that Great Britain is going to beat Papua New Guinea at the end of this tour? I wouldn't.
No. And look, I'd say that Great Britain are probably favourites to beat Papua New Guinea, but I'd be surprised if it's a blowout. I'd expect it to be a pretty close sort of game.
Here's a question for you. Just say Great Britain loses against New Zealand 3-0. And then, I mean, even if they win against PNG, do they then go home and there's a big change to what I mean, is that the change they need? Do
Nothing
they
will
need
change.
to lose? Nothing?
Nothing will change. Because they'll just go, this is just a Great Britain thing. We'll just dissolve it and go back to being England again.
Yeah.
It's kind of what they did last time, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You know what? You're right. You're right. I just don't understand how you allow it to get worse and worse and worse and
Because it's
not
cheaper.
do anything about it.
Because it's cheap.
Yeah, you're right. You're
It's a
right.
cheap option.
You know what? I look at what Mal Meninga has done with the Australian setup and how he has tried to, and this is the Australian Rugby League test setup. And you can see the changes he's made, the way he's building it up, the way he's building pathways, even for the very elite players out of Australia. But why isn't Great Britain doing that?
Don't know. I mean, Mal's even talking about bringing back tours, which just has to happen. There's no better way to get players to get better than to get experience against players who they've never played against before. It doesn't matter how good they are. Like, you talk to any Australian player who, in the past, who's played against Papua New Guinea, and as much as Australia will win those games by 50 points or whatever, they'll all tell you that they didn't like playing those games because the Papua New Guinean players tackled so much harder than anyone else.
Yeah.
That's an experience every player has to have. You've got to play against people you've never been up against because they play a different style. You don't know what you're up against. It challenges you as a player to try and read the game better and read what your opponents are doing a bit better because they'll do things completely differently. Even teams who play badly, they'll be doing something that is not consistent with what you're used to playing against, which is a challenge for you. It's something Great Britain needs to do. They need to be playing more games against Pacific Islands. They can't keep playing against European teams.
I agree. I wonder if we're just seeing the fact that because a lot of their players still come from Super League, are we seeing the fact that Super League is just now that far behind the NRL that even fringe first grade NRL players, they're just better prepared for the toughness, the grind that a test match involves than a lot of these. I mean, there are a lot of pretty big name, players that have been stars in Super League that they get to test level and they're nothing. We're talking about record breakers in Super League, have 1,000 bloody winners' trophies hanging around their neck, and they get to the international stage and they're terrible. I wonder if Super League has just slipped to such a point that they're just not ready for this step. It's like 3 or 4 steps above what they used to be.
I'll say this, which I think is a problem that England Rugby League has had for a long time, other than the whole promotion relegation thing, is they play too many games.
Yeah.
Like you throw in, they've got 20, is it 20 or not, 28 or something games all up if you make it to the grand final, and then you throw in the Challenge Cup on top of that. You're playing 30 games every year.
And you've got those, what is it, Boxing Day games or, those games around the end of this year. They've still got those games that hang around.
Yeah. And I know it doesn't sound like it's that much longer than the NRL season, but it is longer.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, when you've got, the NRL season is pretty much a spot on length. I'd probably knock 4 rounds out of it and have it back to 22 rounds.
Yep.
But there's also the argument that it's not a fair competition until everyone plays each other home and away, which means you'd have to have 30 rounds, which is too long.
Mm.
The English have 12 teams in their top competition. That is a perfect sweet 22 rounds right there. Is it not? I think it is.
But then
they play home and away. It'll be 22 games, and they just have a top 5. And I mean, this is the thing. You can't just say scrap the Challenge Cup. It's an historical thing. It draws big crowds for the final anyway. But so that means they need to reduce the length of the Super League season to accommodate Challenge Cup, so you can still have that as well. At the moment, they're playing too many games, so when rep bonders finally come around, I think it's probably a point that their bodies are just completely tired and busted.
Yeah, there is that point, and that's a good one. But then I look at the forwards that have come over to Australia, and we've been lucky. I mean, Adrian Morley was a very good forward. Sam Burgess was a very good forward. James Graham was a bit different. He was a different sort of player to those two. I think his heights weren't the same as theirs, but he's a grinder. That's his role, and
he's much more consistent too. So he doesn't have the lows that they have either.
Exactly. I mean, we know what James Graham's going to give you for these next 3 tests, for instance. Yeah. But I think that other players like Bateman and Whitehead are a lower level than him, and I think maybe Gareth Widdop, I know he's great. At one point, I think he was the best player in the world for a short period of time, but he might be just an anomaly. You know, he went to Melbourne very, very young. He's almost more of a product of the Australian system and, more importantly, the Melbourne system.
Could you argue, though, that the reason why those forwards that you mentioned were so good is because they came over here and had a much less demanding schedule?
Well, I would say this. Sam Burgess as an athlete was always pretty special, and he was, like, I remember even as a teenager, he was like, the NRL's where I'm going. And Morley was a little bit older, but he come over to test himself. I put it this way. When Morley come over, remember Harvey Howard?
Mm-hmm.
I think that more English players, and forwards in particular, are more Harvey Howard than Adrian Morley. And I think that they've been a little bit lucky that they've had a couple of generational players come through, and it's maybe skewed the way that they've thought about themselves. Because if you take, and look, it's very easy to say, take this player and use average. You do it to the Australian team as well. But you take out Burgess and Graham and Widdop from the last, say, I mean, even like maybe 15 years. Who's the next best player? And are they somebody that anybody would have to worry about?
Well, I mean, we saw him. It was Sam Tompkins. We can joke about how poor he was at the Warriors, but when he was in the Super League before coming over to the Warriors, he was undoubtedly their absolute star player over there, and had been for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Why he struggled at the Warriors, there's probably a lot of reasons behind it, not just ability. I think his ability was fine. I think he's just too big a move.
And to the wrong club.
To the wrong club as well.
And I watched him in the World Nines, and
he looked brilliant.
He was, the thing that I've always said about Tompkins, he has the instincts of a 5'8". He has the vision of a 5'8". He doesn't have, and he's bigger, a little bit bigger now, which was good to see, but he never had the physical size that you need to play 5'8", unfortunately. And then he goes to the Warriors, where they sort of just chucked him in the deep end, and then he got some injury issues and stuff like that. I would love to have seen him go to somewhere like the Melbourne Storm and see what they did with him, because I think they would have given him a role. They would have said, look, we want you to do this, just do this and nothing else. And I would have loved to have seen how he went. I think that if he come back to the NRL now and played at certain clubs, he'd be way better than he was when he was at the Warriors. And I say that, and he's not tearing up Super League like he used to. So, I talked so much about Great Britain many, many years ago and what was going on and what was happening. Now I just feel tired when I talk about it, and I feel sad because I know, and you would remember this, was there anything better than staying up in the middle of the night and watching Australia play Great Britain in a test match?
Nothing about it. That was the thing that was great. And this is the thing is, you wanted to you wanted to beat them. And as much as, throughout my childhood, obviously, I was fortunate that I followed rugby league at a time when Australia never lost a series to Great Britain. But you never wanted to lose to them, and it was never an easy game.
No.
And at the same time, the one thing that I hate to see is Australia flogging an opponent who they should be having a tough match with. And obviously we've ripped on England an awful lot in previous episodes, but we get down to the nitty gritty of it. I want to see Great Britain going toe to toe with Australia and New Zealand, because I find that I get more engaged in the game if I feel that my team is a threat of losing. Whereas if I'm watching Australia or New Zealand play against Great Britain, and Great Britain are turned out like they did on the weekend, I look at it and go, if they can't beat Tonga, it's a good thing they're not coming up against Australia, because that could just get messy and that'd just be sad. I mean, that's the thing. I don't sit there and gloat about the fact that Australia beat New Zealand and New Zealand just looked average. To me, that's just disappointing.
Same here. I look at it and being lucky enough to be there when they won the World Cup in Brisbane, and it was electric. Like, you can't explain what it's like when the air is full of electricity and you've just witnessed history, and you've watched the great Benji Marshall be better than everyone in the biggest international game. There's nothing like that. And to be able to beat an Australian team that always turns up on their home soil, like, it's incredible. And that's why I'm more excited to see Australia play against Tonga this weekend than I kind of was to see them play New Zealand, because I don't know what's going to happen against Tonga. Australia's probably going to win, but I would rather see Australia play different opponents and win than just beat New Zealand and Great Britain over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I can say that because never in my lifetime have I seen Great Britain beat Australia in a test series, ever.
To the point where they don't even bother playing test series anymore, just to, I dare say, to save them the embarrassment.
Well, can you imagine if this Great Britain team this week was playing Australia, somewhere in Australia where the weather's warmer? Australia would wipe the floor with them. I think the Australian A team would smash them.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just sad. It's like I'm sitting here like looking down thinking, man, it's just sad. I wish it wasn't like that. I hope they do something to turn it around. Here's a question for you. Do you think Wayne Bennett, I don't think he's the coach for them, and I said that leading into the World Cup when they couldn't score a point against Australia.
Yeah.
Who would you look at as a coach for Great Britain?
That's a good question. You know what? I think too often Great Britain has thought they need to get a current coach to coach the national team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if there's anything Mal Meninga has shown us is you don't need a tactician as a head coach when you've got your national level. You need someone who's got strong ties with the team. They've played for the team, and they can teach you about what it means to play for them and how to treasure the jumper and all sort of thing, and motivate the players to play. Be a man manager more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Maybe I think they've got to get some older heads in there who have played there and play with a bit of passion, like Adrian Morley and the like.
But don't you think that they do also need somebody, because this was a failure for Great Britain for a long time, like their use of the bench was diabolical. They do need somebody that is able to control something like that pretty well.
Yeah, they do. I don't know, maybe Ellery Hanley, if he'd be interested. He's done coaching before.
Yeah. I'd rather see him than Bennett in there.
Yeah, Wayne Bennett is just so far wrong. You need someone who's in England who is known as being one of the absolute all-time greats of the game, and Hanley is that.
Yep.
A fire as well, though he's probably a bit different given he was a winger, but I'd prefer Hanley because he was a playmaker. He's also a forward. He knows what you need for both roles. passionate about playing for the team, playing for the country. And also has some tactical skills, but you just know he'd be able to provide the all-round package you need as a coach there. And certainly you should put good assistant coaches around him. His job comes about motivating the team and unifying them and getting them focused on playing for Great Britain and what it means for them. And he can add some of the skill stuff and stuff around that as well. But his job should be motivating the team. And I don't think a Great Britain player is going to feel like they should be playing for a coach who's never played in the country.
Yeah, it's got to be difficult. It's got to be difficult. I think because we've got Maguire who's coaching New Zealand, but I mean a lot of the Kiwi players, they're used to playing. Well, you look at someone like Christian Wolf though. I mean the Tongan players absolutely love that bloke.
He's been tied in with that club though with that nation though, at coaching level for a long time, and that's probably a reason why they love him so much. He's been there so long, and a New Zealand coach coming from Australia is not a big drama because he sees all those New Zealand players playing every week anyway, just in the NRL.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Great Britain really needs to start thinking internally.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, stop putting Australian-born players in their national side. 100%. I don't care how good they are. You need to prove that you can compete as British players or Great Britain players, and you don't need the help of bloody Aussies and Kiwis and everybody else in there. You can do it on your own. And that's motivating. And I get a British legend in there is involved in the coaching at some level. Bennett's got to go.
Yeah, I've said before, Bennett will get your team 85% of the way there, but that extra bit, he's proven he can't do anymore, I think. But anyway, we should talk about these other games because we watched a really cool game, actually.
Okay. Well, before we get to that one, Scotland absolutely thumped Serbia 86-0. Now, Serbia had a player sent off early in the first half, and Scotland looked like they were going to break all the records, and everyone was looking for the record books.
Including us.
It was a 52, 56-0 at half time.
Yeah, but the thing, wasn't it something like 40-0 after 25 minutes, like something about that?
Yeah.
And we were sitting here talking to each other because we couldn't unfortunately see the game, but we were talking to each other like, how's that even possible? You know, we as you said, we're scrambling for the records, and they were on record pace for probably all up until that last 15 minutes of the first half.
Yeah. So Serbia's credit, they only conceded 30 points in the second half with 12 men on the field, but that's a big loss for Serbia. They would have been going into that match reasonably confident that they could go toe-to-toe with Scotland and possibly even get a win. So to go down like that that's going to hurt them big time.
Yeah.
We then sat up and watched an interesting game between Spain and Ireland. And
very interesting.
Spain's side was full of mostly players involved in the French leagues. Ireland's was mostly local players. And for the most part, Spain were right in this game for probably, we have to guess, about an hour of game time.
And like the Spanish team, it's funny because sometimes you can watch these internationals against these really developing nations now, and you can see that they don't know how to play the game all that well. There were some players in the Spanish team, like their halfback was actually pretty damn good. His kicking game was nothing short of phenomenal in this match. He was doing a few things around the field that were really like, it stood out. He might have been the best player in the field.
But yeah, he was very good.
Eventually they got, like, just the grind got to them and the clock a little bit too.
Well, we did have a look at the clock because I know people were telling me in the live chat that the way the clock works on the live stream with that particular broadcaster was it goes for 45 minutes and then they have injury time after it and stoppage time, whatever it was. But it is officially 40 minutes of game time. They were trying to tell me, but
there's no way. There's no.
It's hard to accept. So the way the stream went, okay, the clock went to 45 minutes for both halves, so it was very soccer oriented.
Mm.
And then once it hit 45 minutes, we went into stoppage time or injury time, and we didn't know how long that went for. So
we started counting.
A freaky count at how many minutes each half was. So the first half was...
It was 47. It was 47 minutes.
47 and a half minutes.
Yeah.
That's right. And the second half was much longer.
Yes.
From memory.
Yeah. It ended up that the entire game time was about 105 minutes. And, like, I'm talking by a stopwatch, because when we were watching the first half, we're like, okay, why is he not calling it up? And then the clock keeps ticking, and we're like, okay, that just keeps ticking. And then we get to a point where, like, do they think it's 45-minute halves? And then even at 45 minutes, the clock stops, but they keep playing footy. So we're ready in the second half. So I put a stopwatch on it. And, yeah, we all up to game time was about 100. It was 105 and a half minutes all up.
And we need to stress that this game did not go into overtime.
No.
Ireland won this 42-8, but literally up until the last, as I said, 20 odd minutes of actual game time. I think it was about 22-8 or so to Ireland. It was still sort of in the balance.
Yeah. If Spain had have been able to score, it would have been game on. And Ireland ran away from it. It was funny because you were doing the live updates, and the live updates, you ended up having, like, to put in 3 tries in the space of about 90 seconds, because they were scored so, like, 15 minutes after the game should have been over. It was incredible.
Yeah, that was difficult. This was also the other game of the match where it was littered with flare-ups.
Mm.
And at one point, the Ireland's halfback went running down the field chasing after one of the Spanish players to have an altercation with him, and he ended up getting sin-binned. Don't know what the hell that was about or what went on there, but just weird shit like that.
You looked at the replay, because we didn't have replays. It was kind of just live straight the way through. You actually took your feed and rewound it and tried to find something. You couldn't find anything, but it was funny because the way you described it was like, he just went crazy.
Yeah. Irish halfback just went crazy.
Yeah.
Lost his cool and just went running around trying to bash someone.
I would love to know how long he spent off the field, hey? I bet he was off that field for 25 minutes. I didn't see when he ran on.
It was the longest binning ever.
Yeah, definitely.
It was insane, but insane in a way that it was bloody enjoyable, even if it was from 2 a.m. till 4 a.m.
Yeah, we had a good laugh watching it, and like as you were saying, you watch these games and there's something about them. There's a little bit of a magic about them that you kind of want more of them.
And you're not distracted by graphics and stats and commentators and camera angles and that sort of stuff. You pretty much got one camera, no commentary. It's just you watching football.
Mm. And watching people that love playing footy, and that they are as proud to play for their country as the Kangaroos players are.
That's right. So I thought I'd do a quick mention here of the games that are coming up this weekend, because we've got quite a few. We might even have a few more late night ones. Mm-hmm. So on Friday, Greece plays Scotland. On Saturday, Samoa plays Fiji, Australia plays Tonga, and New Zealand plays Great Britain, and Italy plays Spain.
Oh, wow.
A big day on Saturday.
Yeah, so many games that are going to be interesting. I think we'll probably do a little bit of a preview show about some of the test matches coming up. But, the game I'm really looking forward to is Fiji versus Samoa.
Yeah. I'm going to be keen to see how Greece plays against Scotland, to be honest. That's going to be a pretty good game. And New Zealand v Great Britain. I want to see. I think if Sean Johnson improves and comes out playing really good football against Great Britain, that can become a quite an inflated scoreline there.
What do you think? Because I don't know if Foran is injured or not. Because I was surprised that Johnson played rather than Foran. If Foran's not injured, I replace Johnson 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
If Foran isn't available, do you put in Jerome Hughes?
I don't know. I don't rate Hughes as a half. I think he's a good fullback.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what to do there. I think what I'd do is I'd switch Marshall and Johnson.
Okay.
Take some pressure off Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Because Benji's fine with it. I think that would be a solution there to help Sean Johnson out a bit.
I would drop him. I don't rate Hughes as a halfback either, but I feel as though, especially playing against Great Britain, who, I mean, their halves aren't great, I think that he would get the job done and he would give you... He wouldn't be so terribly disappointing. He might not have the same ceiling that Johnson potentially does, but he also has a much higher basement, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Just having a look here. I had a bit of a wild idea. Just want to check the lineup for the test match that was played last week when New Zealand played Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be worthwhile putting RTS at 6? Nickel Klokstad at fullback?
Ooh, man, I would say that RTS could just about do anything on a footy field. I think he's one of the best 3 players in the world. Wouldn't be the worst. I don't mind it. I don't mind it. He'd be hard to stop as a ball runner. If they gave him a role that was real basic, like a Bellamy sort of style, that, look, I just want you to do a couple of things. Don't give him heaps. Don't give him free rein. Just say, look, I want you to just be a ball running 5/8. Yeah. I think that would work really well for them. And Klogstad at the back, I've got no problems about him. He's fantastic. In fact, I think he'd be. Look, RTS is a different level. He's a superstar. But I think at the back, Klogstad is going to give you everything you still need at the fullback. Benji with RTS running off him, Klogstad out the back. Oh, man. I like that, Andrew. That's a good one.
That's kind of the out-of-the-box thinking that I think New Zealand might need to come up with for that.
And if you've got him running it, and they're not going to know what to do with RTS.
No.
I mean, he's a giant of a man anyway, RTS. Damn, I really like that. Do they pull the trigger on it, though? It's a gutsy move.
Yeah, it takes some balls.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something they could look at, I guess, even if they just keep the lineups as they are, but just change them around positionally when they get on the field.
Yeah.
It'd catch Australia out, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't just have one defender running out of the line as a back rower at RTS.
No.
One defender's not going to shut him down, especially when he's got ball in hand and he's the one moving forward.
Yeah, and he's got the ball playing ability that, as I said, if you just say to him, look, I want you to be a ball runner, his natural ball playing ability is going to kick in. Yeah, I really like that. That would be horrifying to Great Britain.
It will be.
Damn, I really like that. You should be a coach.
Wow, I'm available. Hashtag hire me.
Yeah. I tell you what, on that note, right, if anybody at the International Rugby League is listening, you got two dudes here that sit up until 4 a.m. watching Spain versus Ireland. We are ready. I'm a caller. I call football games already. I call New South Wales Cup games. You've got a commentator and a historian. If you want somebody to call these games in English over the top of all this stuff, get in touch with us. Podcast@leaguefreak.com. Our rates are very reasonable.
And we'll even do it seriously.
Yeah, we wouldn't do a piss take one. It would be a full on. We'd research these players. We would be full on with it. So yeah, we do it properly.
Absolutely.
Get in touch with us.
Get in touch. And if you want to get in touch with us, you find us on Twitter @FergoFreakPod.
Mm-hmm.
Any shout outs you want to do?
Shout outs. Let's have a look here, eh? Let's look through the old Twitter. First of all, how nice was it to have Greeno on today? He was a great guest.
It was.
It's fantastic.
We're already working on something with the Block Boys. So the Dutch rudder isn't dead yet. It's still going on.
It's still on. Yeah, we were man, I think when we do that episode that we've got coming up with them, what did they say it was? March? January, March?
The one we're going to do with them, Unity Day. I don't even know what the date of that is.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the date is. But
Bruno will have to tell us.
Yeah, they'll let us know. But I might get hammered for that. The starting block. Go to Twitter, put in the starting block, drop the K at the end, follow the boys, Boogie Bumper as well. All of our usual listeners. Hello, Nadine. Hello, Richard Cranium. Hello, Bartram13. Hello, Mo Storm. It's Mo Storm, isn't it?
Is it Mo Storm or Mofo Storm?
Oh, is it Mofo Storm?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. They knew who I'm talking about.
Carsten Brummer.
Yep. Got in touch with us.
James Smith, 1001.
Yes.
Make sure you check out Inside Sport magazine this month. In November. There might be a little profile piece in there about the Big Bash League in the cricket.
Oh, nice. Do you know who wrote it?
Oh, funnily enough, I think it was a rugby league historian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What would he know about cricket?
Yeah. Interesting selection.
Hello to Tia. She's up. She's just liked one of my tweets, so I thought I'd say hello. Who else have we got here? G'day, Dr. Alan Pierce. I know he listens in. Yeah. Who else? Sam. We already said hello to Sam.
I'll give a shout out to
Paul
Nathan.
MC.
Oh yeah, Paul MC. I'll give a shout out to Nathan. Met him at a kid's birthday party a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And good bloke. He loves the podcast. He said he went for a drive from Melbourne up to Sydney and listened to us all the way up there and all the way back.
Oh, nice.
I went, Jesus Christ, that's got to be the worst idea for a 6 to 8 hour drive I could think of. But there you go, listening to myself the whole time.
Nah, a podcast is good, eh?
Yeah. So no, that was good. So cheers, mate, for tuning in.
Yeah, and I think we're good with everything. Go to patreon.com/RL Project.
Yeah, get in there and make a monthly donation. It can be as little as $1 up to, some people are donating $25 a month. So get in there and help us out. We've got a ton of stuff coming up this off season. So and in the future, boy, there's a lot of stuff that's got to be put in there. Yeah, I think I said before that the site's about 32% complete, just to give you a rough idea.
Yeah, it's it's going to need a couple more weeks, eh?
Oh yeah, that's a big job, that one. And Actually, one last thing I want to say too. Get on touch with us, either of us on Twitter or the podcast Twitter account or via email. Tell us what you think we should do for our 100th episode.
Yeah.
And don't piss fart around. You've only got like a few, we might even just give you 2 days to do it.
And make it something reasonable as well.
Yeah.
Like, make it something we can actually do.
Yeah. Something that you'd be interested in. That's something we would do. I'm not going to eat a cat. I'll make that clear.
If we could source cat, I would. But we can't source cat.
No.
Maybe I could eat some sort of
Cat
meat.
derivative.
Cat derivative. But what would be the weirdest meat that I could source? Like, kangaroo. It's a little bit too plain. Like,
Have you had goat?
Part of me feels like I've had goat before.
You can have it at Indian restaurants.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
I think I've had goat before. Hey,
how about rabbit?
I've never eaten rabbit that I can remember. Let me think.
Yeah, a rabbit stew.
Yeah, rabbit stew. I remember seeing I'm going down rabbit holes now myself. I remember seeing how to stew a jackrabbit actually on a hunting show.
That's a handy skill to have.
Yeah, you got to stew it for a long time. They're pretty tough, apparently.
Yes, step 1, catch it.
Yeah. They're pretty big too. Get a lot of meat off them.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's more about the broth than the meat, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
How do I know all this stuff? I don't put it into practice.
This is educational moments right here.
Yeah, it's great.
There you go. Cop that, Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah.
And on that note, we might wrap this one up. What do you reckon?
Yeah. Drive home safely.